The roar of an engine cut through the cold morning air, echoing across the shattered landscapes of late World War II Europe. Pilots in the Luftwaffe were trained to fear the skies dominated by the Allies, yet on one fateful day, one German ace found himself not just facing, but flying the very aircraft that had haunted him for years. A plane so powerful, so precise, that it had changed the course of aerial combat, the P-51 Mustang. But this wasn't an Allied pilot in the cockpit. This was a German Luftwaffe ace, soaring above the European countryside in a machine he had only dreamed of flying. It all began in the summer of 1944, when the Allies' air superiority over Europe was reaching an unprecedented level. Bombers thundered across the skies, escorted by the sleek, fast P-51 Mustangs, striking deep into the heart of Germany. For the Luftwaffe pilots, it was a nightmare scenario. These aircraft were faster, had longer range, and could outgun almost anything the Germans had in the sky. And yet, amidst this chaos, one pilot dared to imagine, what if he could capture one of these machines? What if he could turn the tables? That pilot was Oberleutnant Hans Joachim, a seasoned Luftwaffe ace with dozens of victories to his name. Known for his daring tactics and icy nerve, Hans Joachim had survived years of brutal air combat, witnessing countless comrades shot down around him. Yet even his experience, his instinct, and his skill were challenged by the Mustang. The stories reached him through debriefings, whispered in the officers' mess, told with a mix of admiration and fear. Allied pilots would dive and twist through the skies with unmatched agility, disappearing from pursuit as though the laws of physics had been rewritten. For months, Hans Joachim plotted and waited. Rumors of captured Mustangs trickling back to German airfields only fueled his obsession. These were rare, treasure-like machines, often damaged or incomplete, used mostly for testing by engineers who marveled at their design. Every report he received filled him with both longing and frustration. What if, he thought, I could fly one myself? What secrets could be uncovered if the Luftwaffe had access to such a weapon? The opportunity finally arrived in late 1944, amid the chaos of retreating fronts and crumbling German defenses. One Mustang had been forced down behind German lines during a skirmish, a gift from fate wrapped in aluminum and war paint. Engineers scrambled to make it airworthy, their hands shaking as they checked every bolt, every panel. Hans Joachim was summoned, his heart pounding with anticipation, his mind racing with possibilities. Today, he would climb into the cockpit of a plane that had terrorized his nation's skies. Today, he would experience what every Luftwaffe officer had feared and envied for years. As he approached the Mustang, the air seemed to thrum with electricity. Its polished fuselage reflected the grey sky above, its wings stretched out like a predator ready to strike. Hans Joachim ran his hands along the sleek body, tracing the lines of a design years ahead of its time. Unlike anything the Germans had in service, this machine combined speed, agility, and endurance in a way that left even the most seasoned engineers in awe. It wasn't just a plane, it was a statement of technological dominance, a whisper of a future that seemed impossibly far away in the midst of war. Sliding into the cockpit, Hans Joachim felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The controls were familiar yet foreign, a puzzle that demanded both instinct and respect. Every lever, every gauge seemed designed to reward precision and punish error, a reflection of American engineering brilliance. He ran through pre-flight checks with meticulous care, knowing that one mistake could end his life and destroy the opportunity to study the aircraft fully. And then, with a deep breath, he fired up the engine. The Mustang's engine roared to life with a deep, confident growl, a sound that had become synonymous with Allied air dominance. Hans Joachim's pulse quickened. This was no longer an enemy aircraft to fear from afar, it was now his responsibility, his tool, his secret weapon. As he taxied down the runway, the ground slipping beneath him, the full power of the Mustang became apparent. Acceleration was immediate, smooth, and intoxicating, and as he lifted off, Hans Joachim felt the uncanny thrill of flying a plane that seemed to anticipate his every move. For the first time, he understood why Allied pilots had been so deadly. The Mustang was more than speed or firepower, it was a perfect blend of both, designed to dominate long-range missions and dogfights alike. Every turn, every dive, every climb revealed strengths that no German fighter had matched, and yet, Hans-Joachim was not deterred. If anything, this flight ignited a spark of determination. If Germany could replicate even a fraction of this design, the balance in the air could shift. After landing, Hans-Joachim wasted no time in reporting his findings. He described the Mustang's engine, its maneuverability, its lightweight frame, and its ability to sustain high speeds without overheating. But his report went further. He urged, with almost desperate insistence, that Germany not simply study the plane, but copy it, immediately. In the eyes of Hitler and the High Command, time was short, resources were stretched thin, and the war was slipping through their fingers. Yet Hans-Joachim's plea carried the weight of a man who had flown the future of aerial combat. His recommendation was radical. Germany was already developing advanced aircraft, some of which had never seen the sky in combat, yet nothing could match the Mustang's combination of speed, range, and firepower. Hans-Joachim knew that without decisive action, the Luftwaffe would continue to face disaster in the skies over Europe, and so he pressed forward. His report, filled with technical details, personal observations, and an undercurrent of urgency that made it clear this plane was not just another enemy fighter, it was a symbol of what Germany had failed to achieve, and a blueprint for what could have been. But this was only the beginning. Flying the Mustang was one thing. Attempting to replicate it under the immense pressures of a collapsing war machine would prove far more challenging. As Hans-Joachim prepared for further test flights and detailed evaluations, the story of a German ace flying a captured P-51 Mustang was already spreading among the officers and pilots. Whispers of awe and disbelief followed him wherever he went. For many, it was a glimpse into a war that could have turned out differently, had the resources, the timing, and the decisions aligned. The Mustang was no longer just an enemy plane. In the hands of a Luftwaffe ace, it became a symbol of possibility, of desperation, and of the haunting reality that sometimes, key to survival and victory lay not in bravery alone, but in understanding the technology that dominated the skies. Once Hans-Joachim had tasted the Mustang's power, there was no turning back. Each flight became a study in precision, a delicate dance between man and machine. Engineers and officers watched in awe as he pushed the aircraft to speeds no German plane could match. Every maneuver, every roll, every dive revealed the genius of American engineering, the way the Mustang could accelerate out of a turn, sustain high-speed climbs, and respond instantly to the slightest input. Hans-Joachim marveled at it, but he also took notes with meticulous care, recording every detail, every nuance that might one day give the Luftwaffe a fighting chance. He flew low over forests, tracing rivers and valleys, feeling the thrill of a plane built not just to survive in combat, but to dominate it. The canopy gave a clear view of the world below, each tree, building, and river stretching out like a map of potential strategies. He compared it silently to the Messerschmitts and Fokker-Wulfs he had flown for years. The difference was stark. Where German planes demanded skill and constant correction, the Mustang rewarded careful, decisive action. It was fast, yes, but it was also precise, balanced, almost elegant in the way it moved through the air. After several flights, Hans-Joachim was called to present his findings. The room was tense, filled with engineers, officers, and a few high-ranking officials who had been following the reports with curiosity and skepticism. He spoke clearly, outlining the Mustang's strengths: the laminar flow wing design that allowed greater speed with less drag, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that combined power with reliability, and the range that allowed long escort missions deep into German territory. Every fact he recited was backed by personal observation, every claim punctuated by the experience of a man who had flown dozens of combat missions in the plane itself. Yet, as impressive as the technical details were, what fascinated everyone most was Hans-Joachim's personal account. He described the feeling of acceleration during takeoff, the responsive controls that seemed to anticipate his movements, and the confidence it inspired in the pilot. He spoke of dives that felt like plunging through velvet, rolls that responded like an extension of his body, and the freedom of flight that came from knowing he could outrun almost any adversary. His words painted a picture that no schematic or blueprint could capture the Mustang as not just a machine, but as a force to be reckoned with. Hans-Joachim's recommendation was clear and insistent. The Luftwaffe needed a plane that could match the Mustang, and time was critical. He urged the engineers to study the captured aircraft in detail, to replicate its design wherever possible, and to produce a fighter capable of reclaiming the skies. He warned that failure to act would mean continued disaster against Allied bombers and their escort fighters, but the challenges were immense. Germany was stretched thin, resources were scarce, factories were damaged by Allied raids, and the pressure of a war increasingly slipping out of control weighed heavily on every decision. Despite these obstacles, Hans-Joachim continued flying the Mustang, exploring its limits. On one flight, he attempted a series of sharp turns and dives, replicating scenarios he had encountered in combat. The plane handled every maneuver with an ease he had never known. He pushed it to altitudes and speeds where German fighters struggled to maintain stability, taking careful notes on its behavior at every point. Each test revealed more secrets: how the engine performed under extreme stress, how the aerodynamics allowed for sudden changes in direction without losing momentum, how the armament systems were integrated seamlessly without compromising performance. Word of the flights began to spread beyond the testing grounds. Fellow pilots whispered about the German ace who had flown the legendary P-51, and the story quickly became a source of awe and envy. Hans-Joachim's experiences were not just technical, they were almost mythical. To witness him take off in that plane, glide over the terrain with uncanny precision, and land unscathed was to see the future of air combat in motion. For a brief moment, even as Germany's situation grew dire, there was a sense of possibility, a hope that mastery of the Mustang's design might offer a chance to level the odds. But there were also tensions. Some officers doubted whether it was worth the effort to copy a single enemy aircraft when German designs already in development promised advanced capabilities. Others feared that sharing Hans-Joachim's insights would slow production or divert scarce resources from existing projects. Hans-Joachim faced resistance, yet he persisted, demonstrating the Mustang in maneuvers that left no room for doubt. Its speed, its responsiveness, its combination of endurance and firepower, it was unmatched, and he made certain that everyone in the room could see it with their own eyes. Even Hitler became aware of the flights. He was intrigued, as he often was, by the promise of a superior weapon, and summoned reports from the Luftwaffe command. Hans-Joachim's accounts were filled with technical jargon, yes, but also an unmistakable urgency. This plane was not just another fighter, it represented a potential turning point in the air war. If Germany could replicate it before it was too late, he urged immediate action, pleading with the High Command to divert resources toward understanding and copying the Mustang's design. Every flight, every observation, every page of notes underscored the same message: speed, precision, and technological innovation were the keys to survival in the sky. Amid this, Hans-Joachim also faced the human side of the story. Flying the Mustang stirred emotions he had long suppressed. He remembered friends lost in combat, aerial duels that ended in tragedy, and the relentless pressure of surviving a war where each mission could be his last. Yet in the Mustang, he found a rare sense of exhilaration and hope, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, ingenuity and skill could shine through. Every flight was a mix of fear and joy, danger and mastery, pushing him to become not just a better pilot, but a witness to what human engineering could achieve. Engineers pored over every part of the Mustang, taking measurements, dismantling components, and analyzing systems. Hans-Joachim's observations guided their work, his first-hand experience providing insights that blueprints alone could never offer. They marveled at the simplicity and efficiency of the design, the elegance with which speed, firepower, and endurance were balanced. And as the days turned into weeks, the story of the Luftwaffe ace flying a captured P-51 Mustang became more than a technical case study. It became a legend, a tale whispered through the ranks of a man who had seized the impossible and lived to tell the tale. Yet the clock was relentless. The Allies advanced, the war pressed on, and time ran short. The question lingered: Could Germany replicate the Mustang before it was too late, or was this opportunity already lost to the chaos of war? Hans Joachim knew that each flight, each test, each note brought them closer, but the pressure, the danger, and the ever-present threat of Allied attacks made the task nearly insurmountable. And then, on a cold morning, as mist hung over the airfield, Hans Joachim prepared for one final flight in the Mustang that would define his legacy. He climbed into the cockpit, the world below still and silent, and reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here, from a pilot chasing enemy aircraft to a man entrusted with the secrets of one of the greatest machines of the war. The Mustang responded to his touch as if it had always known him, every control precise, every movement fluid. Today, he would push the aircraft to its limits, and what he discovered would change the story of aerial combat forever. The morning sky was heavy with grey clouds, a chill cutting through the air as Hans Joachim prepared for what would become his most daring flight in the captured Mustang. The tension on the airfield was palpable. Engineers, officers, and a handful of high-ranking Luftwaffe officials watched in silence, the metallic scent of fuel mingling with the cold, damp air. This was more than a test flight, it was a statement, a final chance to show that Germany could still learn from its enemies, and perhaps reclaim some measure of dominance in the skies. Hans Joachim climbed into the cockpit with a steady hand, though his mind raced with anticipation. He ran through the controls carefully, feeling the Mustang beneath him like a living entity. Every lever, every dial, every pedal responded with uncanny precision. As the engine roared to life, a vibration pulsing through the air, he felt both exhilaration and a flicker of fear. He was about to push this legendary machine harder than ever before, testing its limits, measuring its potential, and proving beyond doubt that the design was something the Luftwaffe could not ignore. As he taxied and lifted into the sky, the Mustang responded immediately. Acceleration was instant, smooth, and intoxicating, a reminder of why Allied pilots had dominated the European skies for so long. Hans Joachim banked and rolled with practiced ease, taking the aircraft through maneuvers that would have taxed any other German fighter. The plane moved like a predator, responsive to his slightest command, precise, elegant, deadly. He pushed the throttle further, feeling the wind tear past, the earth shrinking beneath him, the clouds opening into stretches of grey-white that seemed to stretch endlessly. Every second of this flight was a revelation. He noted how the Mustang could sustain extreme speeds without losing control, how it maintained stability in sharp turns, and how it seemed almost to anticipate the pilot's intentions. It was a machine built for both endurance and aggression, a perfect storm of engineering excellence. Hans Joachim knew that any German aircraft attempting to match this would need to incorporate its laminar flow wing, its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, and its precise weight distribution. The insight he gained was invaluable, but fleeting. Time was slipping away, and the war was collapsing around him. Landing was tense, the Mustang responding perfectly to his commands even as the tires kissed the runway. The officers on the ground cheered quietly, restrained by awe and disbelief. Hans Joachim emerged from the cockpit, exhilarated yet burdened by urgency. He delivered his final recommendations with force and clarity. Germany must copy this aircraft immediately, replicate its engineering, and build a fighter capable of challenging the Allies before it was too late. Every word carried weight. He spoke with the authority of experience, the knowledge of a man who had flown the enemy's deadliest weapon himself. Hitler, informed of the reports and the flights, was intrigued yet faced with a reality he could not ignore. Factories had been bombed, resources were dwindling, and Germany's technological ambitions were already overextended. Still, Hans Joachim pressed forward, emphasizing that this was no ordinary plane, no mere curiosity. The Mustang represented a decisive advantage, a chance to level the air war if Germany could understand and replicate it. His urgency bordered on desperation, a man who knew that every day lost in indecision meant more German planes destroyed, more cities bombed, more lives lost. Yet despite the brilliance of his flights and the clarity of his recommendations, the war was not waiting. The Allies pressed harder, advancing relentlessly. Resources that could have gone into copying the Mustang were diverted to defending a crumbling front. Hans-Joachim continued to fly, testing, demonstrating, and refining his observations, but the clock of history was ticking. The captured Mustang became both a symbol of what could have been and a reminder of opportunities lost. His final flights were legendary among those who witnessed them. He pushed the aircraft to altitudes and speeds that German fighters could not achieve, performing dives, turns, and climbs that demonstrated the full range of its capability. Each maneuver was precise, deliberate, and awe-inspiring. Hans-Joachim's reports were filled with exhaustive detail: engine performance, aerodynamic behavior, control responsiveness, and combat potential. He outlined how German engineers could adapt designs to match the Mustang's speed, endurance, and firepower, if only they had the means to act. By the end of the campaign, the story of Hans-Joachim, flying a captured P-51 Mustang, had spread through the Luftwaffe ranks. Pilots whispered in hangars, officers spoke in hushed tones in briefings, and engineers marveled at the possibilities. It became a legend, the German ace who flew the enemy's deadliest fighter, who begged the high command to act, who demonstrated what could have changed the air war entirely. Yet history would remember it differently. The war ended, Germany surrendered, and the Mustang remained an icon of Allied air superiority. Hans-Joachim's efforts, brilliant and courageous, could not alter the course of the conflict. Still, the flights left a lasting impact. Engineers had learned, pilots had witnessed, and the idea that one man, armed with skill, courage, and insight, could fly the future of aerial combat, even for a brief moment, endured. Hans-Joachim's story became a cautionary tale, and a testament to ingenuity under pressure. It was a reminder that sometimes, the key to victory was not simply bravery or firepower, but the ability to recognize and seize the advantages hidden in plain sight, even if only for a fleeting moment. In the end, the Mustang returned to Allied hands, its secrets preserved and celebrated. Yet, in the memories of those who saw it flown by Hans-Joachim, it remained a symbol of a daring, almost impossible feat. A German ace piloting the very plane that had defined the skies over Europe, urging his nation to rise to its potential, even as the tides of history swept inevitably onward. The sky, as it always does, returned to silence. The Mustang sat in the hangar, gleaming in the dim light, a machine of extraordinary design that had briefly belonged to an enemy, flown by hands that both feared and revered it. And for Hans-Joachim, the experience would linger forever, the thrill of flight, the edge of possibility, and the haunting knowledge of what might have been if the world had made different choices.